Sorry if I'm interrupting any conversations. I'm going to go ahead and get this started. It's supposed to start at 7. It's now 7:20. I don't want to keep these guys here working any later than they have to. So I'm here to talk about Dianetics and Scientology. Has anyone heard of that? Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and start by, I will talk about my personal history in the organization and what I did. But I do want to cover some basic ground first. I handed out, or I left these little pamphlets around, who is Xenu? And the basic premise is that is the creation story of Dianetics and Scientology. This guy named Xenu, 76 million years ago, had an overpopulation problem in the Galactic Confederacy, and decided that he needed to handle this problem. And so he came up with a clever plan to call everyone in on these planets. Each one of these planets had an average of 170 billion people on each planet. Some of them upwards of 250 billion people. So what he did is he came up with a clever scheme to call them all in for a tax audit. And all, billions of these people just decided that, okay, no problem, we'll go and submit our taxes. And what awaited them was a flash freeze, and they were frozen with propylene glycol and ethanol. And then they were taken onto these giant DC-8 model planes that were equipped with rocket engines, and they were flown from whatever system they were in into the solar system that we live in, and brought to a planet called Tigiak, which is planet Earth. They were then put into volcanoes in these containers that they were frozen in, or placed around volcanoes, and H-bombs were thrown into these volcanoes and exploded, and the bodies of these beings, or these people, were destroyed, and their souls left their bodies and were very confused and didn't know where to go. And so there were these, what are called, in L. Ron Hubbard's terms, implanting stations, where these souls would be attracted to, very similar to the way insects are attracted to light. And once they were in there, they were shown films about all the major religions that we see today, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and all of the religions that are the major religions that are practiced today. From there, these Thetans is what they call the soul. That's the term for the human soul in Scientology. And after they had seen these films over and over and over again, because they're attracted to the flickering lights, you can laugh because this is pretty humorous. They got confused and they started to believe these films they were watching, and they began to attach themselves to human beings all over planet Earth, and they were, in L. Ron Hubbard's terms, not rehabilitated spiritual beings. They were lost, they were confused, they didn't know that they could hold a body, and this was all by Xenu's design because of the overpopulation problem. Sound good? So I want to start out by saying that mythology, unlike other religions, is not at the forefront of your experience in Dianetics or Scientology. This is not something that you learn about until you reach what is called OT3 in the church. And to get to that level, you pay for services in the church, similar, I say similar to the way that you would donate to a church when they pass the basket around and you give them money. But in Scientology, that is a concept called out of exchange, and you must not give people something for nothing. So when you donate to the church, you're donating for a service. You get something in return. And to go from where you start, which is cleansing the toxic chemicals out of your body through a program called Purification Rundown, you start on that process. And from there you go up into what's called the grades, which handle various problems in your life, such as communication, the ability to communicate about any subject freely, freedom from your past, from your reactive mind, which I'll explain in a little bit. But the Xenu story is something that is not broadly publicized for very obvious reasons. Someone told you in the registration cycle, the first time you walked into a Church of Scientology, you would probably tell them, you know, no thanks, not interested. So how do they get you to embark on this journey up the bridge to total spiritual freedom? And that's where I'm going to start with Dianetics and its theories. So in Dianetics, Hubbard was a very clever individual. He took philosophies from other studies and research, and he very much borrowed a lot of information from Freud and Pavlov and a number of philosophers from Greek times, and he did employ logic, and it was all very much, you recognize the information because you've studied it in school in some form or another, or in college. So I guess the theology of it, if you're reading Dianetics, there's some plausibility to it in that you hear many of the things that you've heard elsewhere, but not in such simple terms. He breaks it down into very simple terms so that the layman can understand. And he goes through great pains in writing and the way that he writes to convince you that he's the everyman. He is the guy who wanted to break everything down into simple terms so that anyone, no matter if they're, you know, a particle physicist or a religious scholar or, you know, someone who you know does roofing or any job, any class of life, can confront their reactive mind and remove the emotional and physical stresses that have occurred throughout their life. And what he explains in book 1, and there's 2 books in Dianetics. Book 1 covers the somatic mind and all of the terminology that he uses to describe how things affect you in your life in terms of your emotional stresses, your triggers, everything that happens around you that causes you to be the person that you don't want to be. And he singled it down to a single principle, which was survive. And he posited that every individual is ultimately trying to survive to a greater or lesser degree on a number of dynamics. And he didn't really isolate those dynamics until later, but he did isolate the dynamic principle of existence, which was survive. And he also posited that everyone is surviving to a greater or lesser degree. And he explains a concept about how the mind records everything that you see, everything that you feel, everything that you experience, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain. Everything is recorded in your mind. And he makes some pretty bold claims in Dianetics about, because this was the 1950s when he wrote this, and at the time computers were only capable of holding so much information. And so one of the claims that he makes is that if you were to try to put all the information that is in a human mind into a computer, there's no computer in the world that could hold that amount of information. And so after he discovered the dynamic principle of survive, he was looking for a solution to handling people's misemotion. And there's going to be a lot of terminology that was invented by L. Ron Hubbard that I'll probably say tonight that might not make a whole lot of sense. If you do have any questions, I'll stop at a certain point and address that. But what he discovered was that a person has something called a reactive mind, and that reactive mind is responsible for all of your misemotion, which is the behavior that you don't want to exhibit yourself. That would be, beating your wife, or cheating on your husband, or yelling at your kids, or being a drug addict, or being afraid of heights, or being afraid. What are your fears? Everything is related to your reactive mind. And there are triggers, because your mind, he posits that because your mind records everything that happens, that everything in your environment is a potential trigger that could re-stimulate that earlier incident. And so you have a person here who, say, gets bit by a dog, and I'm not a artist very well. This is just a dog with some hair and tail. And say he gets bit by a dog. He gets bit by a dog, and around him there's a tree, and there's grass, and the sun is out, but there's clouds, and there's a guy driving a car that's, blaring some kind of music that he hates. Or let's just say it's a song that he really loves. So he's bit by this dog. It's a horrible injury. He has to go to the hospital. And in the hospital, the doctor decides, well, you need some pain medication. So he's in the hospital laying down, and they're going to fix his arm because it's got chewed up. And the doctor says, I'm going to give you some pain medication for your arm because you're in obviously a lot of pain. So he gives him the pain medication, and this guy's somewhat unconscious. His consciousness level is not as what it would be if he was completely sober. And they wrap his arm up, they stitch him up, and they send him home. And poor guy's got a messed up arm. Well, fast forward, say, 2 years later, and let's say that song that he was listening to was Who Let the Dogs Out. Alright, so he's walking down the road, and his arm's healed. He's got full functionality of his arm and everything. Of course, his cast isn't there. I don't know why I drew that, but he's walking down the sidewalk. Car drives by, and is playing "Who Let the Dogs Out?" Who? Okay. So he's suddenly he gets a pain in his hand, and his arm starts to hurt, and And another thing the doctor said right before he gave him the pain medication was, you know, you really should be careful when you're walking outside. You just never know what's going to happen. It's a crazy world. So he gets this somatic, which is another term that's in Dianetics, and his arm hurts, and he gets a headache, and he feels sort of dull. He feels like not fully aware, not fully conscious, and he doesn't know why. He's just, you know, his arm hurts, and he's got a headache, and, you know, poor dude. So, in Dianetics, Hubbard further postulates that what happened to this individual was that in his mind he's got these mental image pictures from early childhood all the way up to adulthood. And in these mental image pictures, and this is pretty close to how they explain it in the introductory Dianetics videos, in these mental image pictures, think of this as a movie reel. From moment to moment in your life, second to second, you are recording everything that's going on in your mind. And that includes all of your physical sensations, all of your emotional sensations, and any physical pain or emotional distress, and all of your perceptions. You know, the light on the wall, the light shining against the wall a particular way, the glare off of the wall, the color of the room, the pictures, the books that are right there on the wall, this door handle, this mic stand, the fan blowing, the fan turning, and at the rate at which it is turning. All of these things are part of that memory that you have associated with all of the memories in your life. But when you have an experience such as getting bit by a dog, then you have in that particular memory associated pain, emotional stress, commands, potential hypnotic commands that are able to be triggered in the future by experiencing a similar circumstance. So that tree that he was standing by when he got bit by the dog, if it was like a birch tree, well, maybe when he walks by a birch tree he just gets mad and wants to kick a dog, or he gets a headache, or. There are many psychosomatic illnesses or psychosomatic effects that can occur from having this memory that is essentially infected with a subconscious emotional pain or discomfort, or physical pain or discomfort. And he calls this an engram. And in Dianetic therapy, he proposes and claims scientific proof that you can eliminate all of the emotion, the misemotion, the pain, by going through the incident again in great detail and going over it again and again and again and again and again and again until you remember every detail, the blue wall, the light shining, all of the lights and how they're particularly angled and shining on the wall, all of the books. You might even try to remember the names of the books, exactly the direction the mic stand was pointing, how you felt when you leaned on your side, and the somatic of leaning on your heel. Every single aspect of this memory needs to be recalled for you to remove the ability of the negative effects of your reactive mind, so that this incident becomes merely a memory that you can file in your analytical mind. Your analytical mind has no concept of pain, misemotion. It's just everything is as it is. It's just a record. But an engram, which is in your reactive mind, has power and control over you in the present time and influences you in very negative ways, such as somatics, psychosomatic problems. You know, you think you have, you think you have cancer. You're worried that your kid's gonna disassociate from you. You're worried that you're not doing the right thing. It's something that you've dealt with your whole life. You're worried about any worry, misemotion, negative emotion is all linked to your engrams, and they're all subconscious. They're below your consciousness level. So by Dianetic therapy, you are going in and you are confronting and looking at these incidents over and over and over again until you actually see every single aspect of that memory, and then you can look at it as it truly is, and it has no further effect on you and your ability to confront dogs. You're not afraid of dogs anymore because you went through the incident. You know there was a birch tree there. You know Who Let the Dogs Out was playing. You hate that freaking song, and you know. But now you know what? I didn't hate that song until I got bit by a dog. So now you go out and buy the record, or you don't. So this is the basic premise of Dianetics, and it is a pseudoscience. It's a pop psychology type pseudoscience, and however, it is easy to rationalize this concept for a lot of people. So those are engrams. Now you have another concept that he introduces called secondaries and locks. And a secondary is a picture in your mind, a mental image picture, that has something similar to what you experienced earlier, but isn't that initial incident. And so what happens when you run into a secondary, say I'm walking down the road, I'm the guy who got bit by the dog, there's a birch tree, but there's no car coming by, and I'm not wearing the same shirt, I'm not wearing the same shoes, but because that birch tree looks similar and familiar, I get re-stimulated and I experience some form of psychosomatic effect. And then there are locks, which are the same thing as a secondary, only that they do not carry any emotional or physical somatics that occur. They only link back to the engram itself. They don't make you feel any somatics. You don't get upset. You don't feel like your arm hurts, but it's a chain. Engrams start, and then as they get re-stimulated, they're either a secondary or a lock. So, let's see where I'm at here. All right. So how in the hell does this go? How does this get to the Xenu story? Well, we'll get there very quickly. So, as Hubbard sold many copies of Dianetics in the 1950s, Freud was still very popular at the time, and psychotherapy was a pretty common practice. A lot of people were going to psychotherapists with problems with their husbands. You know, there was a lot more domestic violence and abuse and things like this at that time. Society was different, and when you look at some of the photos of his seminars, you'll see a lot of women there, not a lot of men. It's mostly women. They're trying to deal with their abusive husbands, I guess. So, as he continued, Dianetics was a #1 bestseller in 1950, and over the course of a few years and doing lots of seminars, he made quite a bit of money, and he was an excellent. He had an excellent personality. He was very charming. He was able to engage audiences very well. Very charismatic individual. But the sales started to slump in around 1953. 1953, 1954, I think. So he started, and he would do these Dianetic auditing sessions in front of people. It was very much like watching a stage hypnotist, where a woman would lay down and he would take her through an incident similar to this, and suddenly she would feel this. They would call it a reverie, a Dianetic reverie, where she would wake up and she would feel. And keep in mind, he did say that this was not hypnosis; it was reverse hypnosis, that you were waking someone up. The reason he thought that was because as you're confronting an incident over and over again, you're taking that reactive memory, which is in your subconscious, and putting it and refiling it into your analytical mind so that you remember everything that happened, all the details. And I don't know if you've ever had, I mean, if you have kids, you might be able to relate to this. And you might relate to it in other ways too, with coworkers possibly that ask you repetitive questions over and over and over and over again and just never shut up. Dianetic auditing is a lot of repetitive questioning. So after an hour or 2 or 3 of Dianetic auditing, I mean, I always felt a ton of relief. I'm tired of getting asked the same damn question over and over again. But people started to go back very far into their memories. And, you know, people would go back to when they were 2 or when they were 4 or when they were, you know, 1, you know, having a memory of being in the crib and crying and their mother not coming to comfort them or soothe them, and feeling that horrible emotion of being abandoned and alone. And they've started to run these incidents like an engram. And I couldn't tell you the precise date that he discovered what is called the basic. But the basic is the beginning of the engram chain, all the way back to when you were. I can't draw a fetus worth of crap. A fetus. I'll just say a fetus. Okay. And this will be very interesting. So there was people that were claiming that their memory, they had an engram from when they were a fetus in their mother's womb, and their father having sex with their mother, and it was that the memory that they had was that it was an attempted abortion. And he would run these incidents, and of course, you know, you go through these incidents over and over and over again, and there is a I couldn't explain it. I think that some of it has to just do with human nature and some people's willingness to have magical thinking and mystical thoughts. But after these sessions, people felt amazing. They felt like they really, truly handled something that was bothering them. And they would write success stories and claim that, you know, they were very much helped by Dianetics. And so at this point, he had come up with a therapy that handled a person's entire life all the way up to conception. And like I said, a few years he was doing very well with his seminars, but over time he was criticized by the AMA and the APA, and there were articles published about how it was just a quack, you know, just a bunch of quackery. And so he came up with a pretty brilliant idea, but it was kind of risky. And what he did, because some of these people that became Dianetic auditors, which are the people that take you through this process, became very avid believers and followers in Dianetics. And they believed themselves to be the New Age psychologists that were going to really cure mankind's ills and psychosomatic problems and psychosis and all of those types of issues. And some of these Dianetic auditors started running processes on themselves, and they started recalling things that never happened in their lifetime. And L. Ron Hubbard was like, well, run the process. Apply the same process of Dianetics and engrams and erasing engrams and clearing the reactive mind with, as long as the pre-clear is getting benefit out of it, run the process. So now you have a person, oh shit. All right. So now you have a person that has their present lifetime, and let's call it, let's just do a little timeline like here. Okay, this guy, he hurt himself on a bike incident, broke his leg when he was, I don't know, 6, and at age 8, he busted his head open by falling from a tree incident. And then he got in a wreck when he was 16, wreck. And then when he was 25, he got divorced. And there's a bunch of incidents in between. But this is this person's present lifetime. Well, when L. Ron Hubbard started running, and then all the other auditors started running processes, Dianetic processes, on things that didn't happen in this lifetime, well, suddenly you've got an infinite amount of processes to run, because who's to say how long the universe has been around, or, you know, even if it hasn't been around a finite amount of time, you've got tons of material to work with. And this served as a way for him to, and this is very controversial, obviously, with people within the church, and it is somewhat controversial with people that are still associated, that are still identifying themselves as Scientologists. But when you have this present life, and then suddenly you have all this stuff, even if it goes back 1,000 years, then you have pre-clears coming in the door that you can service for quite a long time. You can get a lot of money out of them. You can do a lot of therapy. And so, since it was a past life deal at that point, and he was running past lives, and people were getting spiritual benefits out of it, or many claims that people would, you know, remove their glasses, throw them in the trash, and never have to use them again because they ran an incident that at some point in their past life they had their eyes gouged out by the Spanish Inquisition, or they had their heads crushed by a rock when they were hunting buffalo in Transylvania or something, whatever. So he invented Scientology. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So in the present lifetime, once a person clears all of their reactive mind, from birth until present time, then they reach a state that Hubbard called clear. And it's clear because you have removed all of the negative effects of your reactive mind, which are basically in your subconscious mind, and refiled them into your memory, your analytical mind, and you are no longer the effect of those experiences. You can approach life in a very clear and basically your past experiences don't influence you in a negative way in the decisions and things that you do in the present time. which is a desirable state for many people. I mean, some people like to learn from experience and know that, you know, if I try and grab a cobra and it bites me, then, you know, probably not a good idea to handle cobras. But theoretically, a clear, had he handled a cobra at some point in his present lifetime and got bit, then he wouldn't have any fear of cobras after he became clear. He'd probably get bit again. So that is what a Dianetic clear is. And so jumping back to Scientology, when you have this past life, past lives, potentially millions, trillions, thousands, whatever, then it opens up a whole new world of possibilities, because you can run processes, Dianetic processes, on someone forever. Because he started to develop his own theories and his own ideas about how the universe was created and how long it had been here, and such and such. So, now, why is it a problem that people believe that? It's not. It's really not a problem that people believe whatever the hell they want to believe. You know, you can believe in the flying spaghetti monster if you want to, or Cthulhu. I love that shirt, by the way. You can believe in whatever you want to believe. But at a certain point, when your beliefs start to harm other people and prevent them from achieving what they would like to achieve, whenever the goals of your organization, if it is a religious organization or even a non-religious organization that has declared principles and behavioral expectations or environmental expectations, at the point at which it becomes that, you have to be critical about that, because when he developed Scientology, it became so much more than what Dianetics was. Dianetics was a pseudoscience therapy. It was essentially a quack psychotherapy. And some people claim that they really got some good results out of it. And that's fine. But as he developed Scientology, he became more and more, well, there's no other really good way to put it. He became more paranoid, he became more psychotic, he became more of a demigod, and he started to think of himself as a god, because when people start looking back at their past lives and he feels like he discovered this, and he feels like he's got the tablets that Moses, you know, handed down straight from heaven. And that can do some dangerous things to people, and possibly induce, or if he already was mentally ill, promulgate that. And that's exactly what he did. He started writing a lot of policies and HCOBs, which are called Hubbard Bulletins. And these bulletins were his new discoveries. And as he would look over the pre-clear folders of the people who were undergoing now called Scientology auditing, he would claim to look for similarities and particular incidents that were affecting the whole of mankind. And he isolated and discovered every one of these HCOBs. This is just kind of funny. Every one of them ends with this very self-aggrandizing proclamation that he was, you know, he's your friend and he helped you, you know, he's your friend, and thank God that I found this for the both of us, because now we can both get the hell out of this hellhole. You know? Every single policy letter is like that. Now, how do you get into a situation where you read this stuff and you're like, okay, cool. Well, that's where thought reform comes into play, and you'll see thought reform as I've been learning about it, and I'm actually, to be honest, I'm new to this, you know. A couple years ago, my wife was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and up until that point, although I was not a out there Scientologist, you know, telling everybody I'm a Scientologist and I apply Scientological principles and whatnot, I still thought like a Scientologist, and I was still applying principles that I had learned to see if they actually worked in real life. Because when you leave a cult organization, the world outside seems like the cult. Not, you know, it really does. It seems like you're in a foreign world, and you feel like if you submit to the whims of society, that you become a cult member, and you feel that your eternity or your spiritual freedom, or, you know, in Christianity or other religions, you feel you're going to hell or you're doing Satan's work or whatever. But in Scientology, it's more like you feel like your spiritual freedom for eternity is at stake. So when my wife was diagnosed with Asperger's, in Scientology, there's a lot of front organizations. One of them is very anti-psychiatry and anti-psychology, and I mean, it is drilled into you that is the worst thing that you could ever do, is to send someone to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. You might as well just put a bullet in their head before you do that. And that's a common thing with cults. They instill fear and phobias. They isolate you from your family and friends, and they, how y'all doing? How's it going? Great. Talking about cults. I didn't believe in mental illnesses like 90% of them. I didn't believe that psychology or psychiatry had contributed anything to society other than homicidal maniacs. I believe that the Columbine massacre was due to prescription drugs that these kids were given, along with other mass homicides. And I believe that the product of psychology and psychiatry was the downfall of mankind, pretty much. So when my wife was diagnosed with Asperger's, I took it with a grain of salt, and was just like, okay, whatever. But at the same time, I was actually starting to read some of the anti-Scientology material that was available on the web, and there is tons of it. But I still had some fear and reservation about doing so, because I was still considering going back to the church and getting more auditing. You know, I'm thinking that my reactive mind is causing me to make myself defect from the church. So, about a year goes past, and I start reading small bits about Asperger's syndrome, and I was shocked that it was all very indicative of the behavior, her behavior, or the way she is, the lack of empathy, the mind blindness, not being aware of someone else's state of mind, the intense social anxiety and social isolation, and the need for routine, to do something the same way every day or do the same thing the same way every time. And at that point, I made a mistake. Instead of trying to start reading more about it, or to try to understand more psychology and psychiatry, what I started doing was reading more about the negative viewpoints of Scientology, the people who had left the church. I started reading about a man named Mike Render, who was a very top level of executive for the church for 36 years, and he had defected, and another guy, Marty Rathbun, who was second in command of the church, had defected. And it was all encompassing. I spent probably almost 18 months trying to read and digest that information and put it together for myself. It was extremely confusing, but at the same time, I'm still trying to learn and cope and deal and find ways to make the relationship with my wife better. But there was too much going on at one time. It's a lot to process. That's a lot to process. So, all right, and I'm getting a little off track here. Why is it a cult? Well, if you look at other cults, I'm going to bring up a reference here from Margaret Singer. She's a doctor that has studied cult behavior for many years, and she has simplified it to 6 conditions for thought reform. And like I said, thought reform is everywhere. It doesn't matter where you're at. You could go to work at Starbucks and experience thought reform. A lot of corporate companies have training programs that are meant to modify your behavior, modify the way you interact with others, possibly isolate you from other areas of the workplace, and so it's everywhere. Thought control and thought reform is everywhere. But where I'm going to be going next is, how is it so destructive? One of the things, the first thing that you want to do to reform someone's thought is to keep them unaware of what's going on and how they're being changed. And when you begin your journey into Dianetics or Scientology, whichever you come to first, a lot of people get in through Dianetics and then get into Scientology. It's a slow process. It's layer by layer, and they do it by building agreement. And they have a very clever little trick or concept that is somewhat applicable in real life. It's all about communication, and a lot of people have issues with communication, and it's a very common way to get someone into the church is by saying, you know, you could probably communicate better. Isn't there someone in your life that you would want to communicate better with? You know, you don't get along so great with your parents, or maybe you get along okay, but it could be better. So there's a little thing that they do in the communication course, which is one of your first steps. And they show you this triangle, and they say that this is what communication is: affinity, reality, and then communication. And the basic concept of this is a very simple thing. If you raise one of these, doesn't matter which one, then you will raise the others. And as an effect, your communication will be better with that person. And affinity is defined as a general liking to another person. Reality is defined on literally what you agree on. Is this wall blue? If it is, then you have some basis of being able to communicate with that person. But say you had a schizophrenic person here who thinks that this wall is orange, and that's a giant sea monster, and then there's a pink elephant, and there's all this stuff going on. Well, if you have no reality with him on that, then you're not going to be able to communicate with him very well. You're just like, yeah, okay, man. And then, what are you going to talk to that guy about? But you say, yeah, man, that sea monster, boy, he's like, do you see the shit coming out of his ears? Do you see those like big nuts that are hanging? And do you see the pink elephant? It's like changing colors now, or do you see? And he might really engage you in that. And to be quite honest, I have engaged people in Los Angeles. There's quite a lot of crazy people in Los Angeles that just walk around on the street day to day. And I have engaged people and used that concept and been able to sit there and talk to them. Now, the conversation was crazier than, you know, well, nuttier than squirrel shit. How about that? But this is not too crazy to think of. This is not a crazy concept. This is something that could work for you. And the really powerful tool that they use before they teach you anything is that what is true for you is true for you. And that is all. What is true for you is true for you. You can take this and use it, or you can't. You can toss it, you know, discard it. Maybe there's something else that you might find that works. Control the person's social and physical environment, especially control the person's time. This should be pretty obvious of how that is a cult. You know, cults want to control every aspect of who you are, where you spend your time. You know, they want to keep a close eye on you because they want to keep you close to the herd. There's different methods that they'll do, but that's a crucial aspect of thought reform. Because when you're constantly around that person, you can constantly implant them or tell them what it is they should be thinking, doing, feeling, and what it is they shouldn't be thinking, doing, or feeling. Systematically create a sense of powerlessness in the person, and you can see this in 12-step programs. You see it in a lot of Christian organizations and in a lot of religions. You know, you have no power. You can only give it to God. Manipulate a system of rewards, punishments, and experiences in such a way as to inhibit behavior that reflects the person's former social identity. And so those first 2 points are very crucial to this step, because once you have complete control over a person's time, and you are, I forgot the third ones. When you convince them that they have no power, then you can sort of start to strip away their personal identity and create a new identity based on the beliefs that you are trying to implant in this person. Manipulate a system of rewards and punishments and experiences in order to promote learning the group's ideology or belief system and group-approved behaviors. Big part of it is being part of a group. Cults like Heaven's Gate, every single one of these guys had what's called a check partner. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't go to the store. They couldn't pack their luggage. They couldn't open the door to the freaking car without their check partner. And that's because they wanted to be a part of that group. And it is part of the manipulation and control. And there are rewards and punishments for doing or not doing those things. And so it's a big incentive and motivator to go with the group, because you do not want to be punished for what you're doing. And then finally, put forth a closed system of logic and authoritarian structure that permits no feedback and refuses to be modified except by leadership or approval, executive approval. Basically, in a cult, there is a person who is your God. And in Scientology, that is L. Ron Hubbard. And in Heaven's Gate, that was Marshall Applewhite, and in Jonestown, it was Mr. Jones, Branch Davidians, Moonies, whatnot. A couple quick things in addition to that are very powerful mind control tools are something called thought stopping, and that's related to language very much. They load the language, and after they've, basically indoctrinated a person, there are terms, it's usually language related. And just for fun, some examples of some thought stop. Well, we'll go what thought stopping is, okay? 'Cause that's really important. When you have an evil thought, or you have a thought of leaving, or you feel like, that's not right, there's always going to be, in a very effective cult, there's going to be an explanation for it. And for as many behaviors as you can have an explanation for, as many reasons as you would want to leave or depart or get away from, or even if you just have a consideration that something should maybe be different, there are terms in language that only usually the cult can understand that explain what it is you're experiencing, why you're experiencing it, and how you need to go about handling that in the proper way, because leaving is never the right way to do it. Leaving is never an acceptable way to get out of an organization like that. And a big reason for that, especially in cults, is that there are a lot of abuses that go on in cults. So, fun little terms, Scientology terms, ones that I personally used or was, told that I, had issues with. Service facsimile. And back to the pages where the engrams are little pictures like a film reel. Hubbard often referred to those pictures as facsimiles, similar to like a fax machine. So it's just a picture. And a service facsimile is a computation generated by the individual to make self right and others wrong, or to dominate or escape domination, and to enhance their own survival and injure others' survival. The computation will cause the individual to deliberately hold in restimulation, if you remember that word, from you have an engram, later on you remember something, it restimulates you. Selected parts of his reactive mind to explain his failures in life or in the organization or for himself or whatnot. So for example, a person may keep an old injury in restimulation so that his family feels sorry for him, looks after him, and whatnot. So, common thing on staff, when I was on staff, is, they'd say, we need you to go sell 35 books on Hollywood Boulevard. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to. I just sold 25 books on Melrose, and it's like 8 o'clock at night, and I don't want to be walking up and down Hollywood Boulevard all freaking night. I want to go home and go to sleep. Stop serve facking. They shortened it as service facsimile. That's a serve fact. You're trying to make yourself right and others wrong, and your reactive mind is restimulating you, and you need to just no case on post. Another term, another language, use of language to stop your thoughts. The purpose of it is to stop yourself from thinking. That's the purpose of it. So when you think about that, about language and how it is used in any religious organization, in any organization that you feel like is using thought reform, the language is so powerful because it can literally stop your thoughts. Whenever especially if you have respect for the person, especially if you've been indoctrinated and there's someone that you respect in the organization and they say, dude, you're serve backing really hard, bro. And it just stops your reasoning and your critical thinking skills, and you immediately revert to this philosophy. Another word is significance, a word that's used in the special sense to denote any thought, decision, concept, idea, purpose, or meaning in the mind in distinction to its masses. The mind is basically composed of masses and significance. What the hell is that supposed to mean, right? Well, a significance in the thought-stopping aspect is that, say, I need you to go talk to this person and get them to donate $10,000 for the renovations of this church. And I'm like, well, I don't think I can, I've only talked to that person 2 or 3 times. I don't know if I can get them to donate that much. Well, you just have a significance on it. So, you know, knock it off and go get that $10,000. You have a significance on it. But whenever you use this loaded language, it stops your rational thinking. Start, change, stop. This one's great. This one's great. The cycle of action in this universe, which is also the anatomy of control, almost the entire subject of control is summed up in the ability to start, change, and stop one's activities, bodies, and one's movement. So, start, change, stop is a super effective way to get people to mindlessly do things over and over, and before they even realize they're doing it. You know, start, change, stop, start, change, stop, start, change, stop. Whenever you get in ethics trouble in the organization, you're assigned a lot of like menial tasks like cleaning and basically slave labor, and start, change, stop. Start, change, stop. Start, change, stop. Don't think that don't think about that your fingernails are coming off because you're scrubbing the floor with mineral oil for 6 hours a day. Start, do it, stop. Okay, now you got to paint the wall. Start, do it, stop. One thing after another. It's robot, you know. And then there's some other terminology. Third-party law. This is this is funny because in any situation where there is a conflict, in any situation where there is a conflict, a third party must exist. So you and I, we can't have a problem. We can't disagree on anything. We can't get along, or we can get along so long as there's not someone else nattering or telling you that I'm really out to get you, or telling me that you're really out to get me. We cannot have a conflict. We can only have a third party. Just totally crazy. Yeah, some of these are getting a little too, I'd have to explain it way too long. I feel like I've done a pretty decent job explaining Dianetics, but Scientology really is a vast system of mind control and thought control, thought reform, coercive action. There is a lot of self-hate whenever you are a staff member and you're involved in the church, because everything that you have an issue with in the church is never a problem with the church. When you're studying on course and you like, I don't really agree with this. Oh, well, the supervisor comes along and says, do you have any misunderstood words? Well, no, I don't really think I do. I mean, there's and then there's the, and then there's as and of, and they'll make you word clear those definitions. I've had to word clear a. That's pretty fun. That took about 6-7 hours to sit there, and because when you word clear, you look at each definition and you make sentences with until you can have a clear conceptual understanding. You have to give an example, most of the time 10 to 20 sentences of each definition. So when you get a word like a, it's and that stops you from finishing what you're trying to do. Like, they'll be like, well, what does a mean? What does of mean? What does, and those are some real doozies. But the point is that when you're studying and you have a problem or you have a disagreement, they will never acknowledge it. You are told to reread the material or to find your misunderstood word, and then you will understand. And so over time, you're just like, whether it is because you just don't want to disagree anymore because you don't want to clear the word a for another 6 hours, or whether you really truly feel like you have an understanding because you cleared the word, doesn't really matter. The point is that you are denying your own self and your own originations and your own ideas and you're only being given the ideas of this man, of this philosophy. All right, so fun little definitions. Galactic Confederacy, and this is straight out of the Scientology dictionary. The former political unit of which the solar system was part. Fifth Invader Force. A Thetan from the Fifth Invader Force believes himself to be a very strange insect-like creature with unthinkably horrible hands. He believes himself to be occupying such a body, but is in actuality simply a unit capable of producing space, time, energy, and matter. Circuit cases, this is one that I always like because everyone on staff has a freaking circuit case. The auditor will encounter many cases which resolve very rapidly. These account for fully 50% of the people who come to him, but he will also encounter many people whose cases are resistive and will encounter a small handful who wouldn't let anything happen if the auditor used a shotgun on them. These are called circuit cases. All that is someone repeating a lot of stuff. It's that person that you meet that like always, and actually, my mom is kind of a circuit case, okay? She's looking out. It's whenever she'll have a conversation on the phone with someone, and if you're sitting there listening, she'll relay the story, because she likes to gossip. She'll tell the story the same exact way, with the same genuine, emotion. And then someone else will call and she'll do the same thing. Same exact way, same words, same genuine emotion. And that's what's called a circuit case. And apparently you could use a shotgun on them and not cure them of that. So, okay, I'm going to do, what time is it? Let's see here. 8:30, all right. My personal story in Scientology, now that I got all that stuff. That's great. My goal with this is to basically just inform you what kind of stuff goes on, because you're going to find a lot of this Xenu stuff and a lot of the space opera stuff, and it's hilarious, it's really funny. But what's not funny is and I encourage people to laugh at it, and really, it's a joke, whatever. But there's some serious things that happen in the church. There's a policy called disconnection, and this fly won't leave me alone. Maybe it's a Scientology fly. Flyentology. I got into Scientology in 2001, 2002, late 2001, and I was having a pretty major problem, and I've had problems my whole life. But prior to getting into Scientology, I was traveling a lot on the road with some friends. Playing music and doing lots of drugs. And before that, I was selling drugs here in town. It's not really. I'm no model citizen by any stretch. But around when I was 23, I had an experience. I think this was when it was some kind of synthetic pot, or maybe it was just all the years, it was about three years on the road where we were just doing massive amounts of drugs, massive, and all day. And it was like we were on the road all the time, so we didn't really sleep that much. And I started having hallucinations, and it was very much reminiscent of times I had taken LSD or mescaline and stuff like that. And geometric patterns are just driving me nuts, but also my adrenal system was on full-on alert, and I had cortisol pumping through my system. There's all these endorphins just driving me crazy, causing a lot of emotional distress on top of constant hallucination. I felt like when people would speak to me, their words were like physically hitting me. And it was a terrifying experience. It lasted for 6 months. And when it started, I stopped all the drugs I had been doing completely. So I was looking for, and on top of that, there were some other things in life that were going kind of, that had affected me pretty deeply. My cousin Bradley was shot. He was murdered in Bayou Den. And it affected all of us that were on the road because we were all really close friends. We'd all grown up together. And after that, we kind of stopped touring. We kind of started doing other things. I went to work at Waffle House or whatever. And I'd come down for a visit and smoke this shit and then started having these crazy hallucinations. And that part of my life was really kind of blurry and confusing, but I do remember the panic and it just felt like I was tripping on acid. Who wants to trip on acid for 6 months? I mean, it's if you've ever done it, it's cool and stuff, but I mean, it's not something you want to last forever. And I had come across a book called The Happiness Purpose by a dude named Edward de Bono, who was a French guy, and he had come off of this 2-year like psychedelic trip after he ate like a whole bag of mushrooms. And he was like going to kill himself and all this stuff. He would lock himself in a dark room, and I was noticing I was doing those things. Like I had a friend in Mississippi who lived in the country. I went over there and I stayed in their upstairs loft, and I would close the door and turn off the lights and just curl up in a ball. I wouldn't even lay on the bed. I would just curl up in a ball and just like, just freaking out. And so I don't remember how long I stayed there, but I ended up talking to my dad on the phone and told him what was happening, and I didn't feel like he had any basis of understanding. He hadn't really done a lot of drugs or anything, but he tried to instill confidence in me that I could survive it and get through it. And it was a very emotional thing, but I believed it. He was able to impinge, and I was like, okay, can do something. I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do, but I can do it. Survive it at least. So I came home and I was looking for this book at Walden Books called The Happiness Purpose, because I thought this guy, if he survived 2 years of it, then maybe he's got some insight for me and I can, solve my problem. But I ended up getting a copy of Dianetics, and I read the book and I looked at the dynamic principle of survival and how things like this happen, how you can get restimulated. There was no past lives or anything like that, but it seemed like a plausible thing. It was worth a shot. And in the book there was a little card that you could call. And when I bought the book, I went home and I read it from chapter 1 to chapter 6. And I called the number, and a girl answered the phone and was like, "Yes, we can help you with that. When can you come see us? We have a program that will detox you, and you get all these toxins out of your body, and it should help you with that." And so I went and did the program, and they had me starting to do courses and whatnot, stuff like that. And I felt that it actually worked. I stopped having the problems with endorphins, and I wasn't freaking out as much. I still had the hallucinations, but it was becoming to where I could manage it. I found out recently that because Scientology is such a distraction, and because it's so like controlling, that many people who have schizophrenia or who have problems like that are very much helped by being distracted. So now I know that's mostly what that was. But they recruited me to go to Hollywood shortly after and open a mission and help with that, because the program that I paid for, that my mother loaned me the money to go do the detox, was like, $1,400. I felt an obligation to donate some of my time and sign a 2.5-year contract, because I got my life back for $1,400, and I, felt like that was a freaking bargain. When we arrived in California, we did a lot of the all of the mind control and thought control started. You do these things called TRs, where they condition you to basically suppress all of your emotions and da-da-da-da. I ended up raising probably $500,000 in 6 months on cold calls to renovate the mission, and started working with celebrities in LA to reg them for money. And but as time went on, I still had disagreements, and I was put into heavy ethics and sent back and forth from Ventura to Melrose to do hard labor and it's what they call sect checks, which is basically really intense interrogative type situations. You're sitting in a chair for 5 or 6 hours. Is there anyone you know that's connected to, are you connected to anyone that is antagonistic to Scientology? Blah, 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 blah. And to be honest, after the whole period of going to being isolated from my family, my brother was there, but we were very much isolated the whole time. I became a believer. I developed that cult identity that I described, and the me that knew that some of the things we were doing were wrong, it was like, just a tiny little voice in the back of my head. And after 2 years, and ruining multiple people's careers and lives, people selling their houses to do a auditing action, or we had a young man who had just got signed to the Minnesota Twins, and he got a $500,000 bonus right out of high school, and was going to be pitching in the majors the following year. We just totally ransacked $350,000, and he became so involved in the church because he paid that money that he just stopped. He didn't focus on his career. Another man from Ventura sold everything he owned to go train at Flag, which is in Florida, to become an auditor up to Class 8 or whatnot. And I just think about all these people that I interacted with, and that's really kind of where, after 2 years, and then not to mention the self-hate and then the imposed hate on you for being so out ethics and all this stuff and being treated very poorly. I tried to hang myself in the Melrose mission, and after that, you become sort of an ethics particle, they call you, and you're a danger, because if something like that did happen, then it would become a PR nightmare. You see things on Scientology all the time that are extremely negative, and they don't want any more of it. So they let me go with my $500 pay, and speaking of, I made $40 a week, worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, living in Los Angeles. So you can try to imagine how to live like that. Not sure how, but we somehow did. After I left, I actually still wanted to be in the good graces of the church. I went to my sect checks. I went and did my OW write-ups. And at this particular time, I see this now, but in hindsight's 2020, right? There were a lot of things that my ethics officer and my auditor were leading me to say about myself that were very introverting. That in OWs you write this stuff down. You write it all down in your handwriting. And there are things that I didn't even do that I wrote down in my handwriting. I see this now as sort of, we've got this on you, and it's a means to keep you silent and quiet for a number of years. And then let me tell you, I haven't said a damn word in almost 10 years. And I started about a month ago with a YouTube page, and I'm feeling much better about everything, being able to talk about it. I know it's extremely hard for people to understand what it's like being in a cult, how you get in a cult, how you stay in a cult, but I can tell you that it has nothing to do with intelligence. It really doesn't. So I think I'll end off there, and if you have any questions, then you can ask. Seemed like you might have had something there. No?
I'm just thinking about growing up in a Baptist church. It's not that intense, but it's don't really think for yourself.
Right. That's what I was saying. Thought reform is all around us. And I really believe, and I would love to advocate to educational or educators, that critical thinking skills and logic should be really something that is taught more than it is, because those it's everywhere. It's everywhere, and to the degree of how destructive it is how much of a problem it is. But people that people that would never see themselves in that kind of a situation can get there, because thought reform actually is a real thing. There's factors that you can, if you can control a person's environment, you can control their behavior, control who they see, what they read, how they interact with other people, and then you develop a language. The language is very crucial. The language is huge, because that's what stops your thought.
Marcus, I know that Tom Cruise was, well, I guess to my mind he's the most vocal Scientologist. And I know his wife, Katie, did not want her daughter raised that way. How did they indoctrinate young children who don't yet have all these moral beliefs, or things that they regret that made them feel?
Well, the children are essentially just sort of dragged along through it. The children don't have a lot of relationship with their parents. For example, in Ventura, there were lots of staff that had children. They all had jobs. There's a guy named Trevor, a kid named Trevor, who was about 8 years old, and he was the guy who answered the phones and greeted people when they came in. He worked 12-hour days, sometimes 14, 16-hour days. And the other children were doing promotional material, folding and doing, putting in envelopes. And the only education that they receive is Scientology. So, and I've read actually a lot about this. When this is second generation cult members, it's a very difficult issue to deal with, because they have no identity. It's when people who are second generation cult members leave, their symptoms, and even first generation members, their symptoms are very similar to Asperger's, because they don't have, they're numb. Most cults, they tell you to suppress your emotions and your feelings, because if you do, you might get someone else to do the same, and then before long everyone's like, screw you, I want my life back. So but as far as how they indoctrinate the kids, it's mainly the same way you indoctrinate anyone else. Control their environment, control their behavior, load the language. It's all Robert Lifton and this lady Mary or Margaret Singer. did a lot of research about Melu mind control, which is communist Chinese mind control. And I mean, I've found it to be almost identical to what goes on in Scientology. And then as I started researching other cults like Heaven's Gate and the Branch Davidians, I see it's all the same. You know, those factors are what contributes to brainwashing people. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
When you're talking about like clearing these, what did you call them?
Engrams?
Yeah, engrams. I guess what came into my mind is like cleaning up your desktop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you're not getting rid of these things, but you're creating subfolders and you're just putting them somewhere.
You're organizing them, and that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. That's it.
That's it.
There's a device that you're kind of hooked up to or something?
The e-meter. Yeah, I really didn't cover much of that, did I? Okay, well the e-meter is this device that is used to, well, technically all it is called a galvanometer. It's 1/3 of a lie detector. It measures resistance in your body. There's a small electrical current, 0.002 microamps, and it measures, what it really measures is like the resistance, like if you have sweat glands, clammy skin versus dry skin, and then also the pressure when you squeeze the can. Nervous tension and stuff can activate it. After Dianetics, Hubbard basically stole this device from a man named Volney Matheson, who had invented it for psychotherapy reasons. At the time, Volney Matheson was getting a lot of, he was making a lot of these machines for various psychologists and psychiatrists to test them, to see if their effectiveness on measuring like reactions. And they didn't want to, he didn't want to use a full-on lie detector because he just wanted to measure the resistance and not the heart rate and the respiratory rate. He felt like that was going to be too much for a psychotherapist to interpret. So Hubbard basically, and there's a whole story behind this too, because Matheson tried to sue Hubbard for, you know, patent infringement and stuff like that. It was originally called the Volney-Matheson electropsychometer, and Hubbard stole the technology and then renamed it the Hubbard e-meter. And it has if you're familiar with hypnosis and you got the little swinging pendulum or whatever, it serves that similar purpose. Because when you're in a Dianetic session or a Scientology session, you're holding these cans and you're thinking of these incidents, the auditor, you can't see what he's seeing, but he's looking at it and he'll look up at you, you know. And if a thought reads, then he'll be like, well, what was that? And you might not know what that, you might not have had a thought. So you're literally reaching and you're like, you're mocking up things, and as long as it's getting a read, then you feel like you're actually getting somewhere. Especially with the past life stuff, you know, they'll be like, whoa, what was that? What was what? That right there. And then you mock something up and you're like, well, that can't be real, you know? I wasn't impaled by Vlad the Impaler and wherever, Transylvania, this shit, you know? That didn't happen to me. He's like, oh, okay. What was that? And then you know, it's like, well, you know, you keep getting reads on the meter, so, and they will run the case as long as it benefits the pre-clear. So it serves as a hypnotic device, really, because you're going into this state of somewhat conscious, somewhat creative thinking. You're thinking of these things that may have, could have, possibly, whatever, happened. And sometimes when your needle floats after you've talked about the incident, you'll go through the whole incident. Well, I was impaled by Vlad the Impaler. It was it was like 11:30 in the morning, and the Cossacks or whatever were storming the castle, and I remember almost falling off because of the step. You know, there was a cobblestone that was loose, and I remember thinking at that moment, God, I wish that someone would have built this bridge better. And you know, like all the moments that you think that you might have, the moments of clarity before death or something. And then he ran up to me and he stabbed me in the stomach, and then he screamed this, and I mean, you literally just make all this stuff up, and then it's validated. And, oh, your needle just floated. Thank you for telling me that. And see, they do not supposedly invalidate what you say. They can't. It's a very one-sided process. They ask you questions, you answer. They do not say, oh, okay, well, do you really think that you did that? Or it's not like typical psychotherapy where they will discuss with you. They have a set list of what they're going to say and a set list of responses based on what happens on the meter. Yeah. E-meters. Yeah, what you got?
Is there any reason, in your opinion, usually when I hear Scientology mentioned, it is always associated with the West Coast, and at least in the media.
Right.
I don't know if
To
that-
California, Hollywood celebrity religion. Any reason?
What would do you have a take on that?
Well, yes. And it's not just mine either. I just finished reading Going Clear, which is supposedly one of the most fact-checked books about Scientology. And there's a lot of information out there about things that Hubbard supposedly did or didn't do or whatever. I can tell you this, that his biography that is released by the church is total BS. But Hubbard knew what he was doing whenever he formed his church in California, in Hollywood, because he saw the value of having someone who is an opinion leader, and that's a term they use in the church, proselytizing their religion and showing that it's effective. And if you have a movie star or a famous musician who's a Scientologist, other creative types of people are, you know, they're open to the pseudoscience, pop psychology type thoughts or explorations, you know, like astrology or I'm not going to say Buddhism is pop psychology. I'm just saying they're open to alternative forms of, you know, thinking about the universe. They're what in psychology they call psychotic deviates, where they think a little differently about the world. And those are the people that a lot of times are attracted to Scientology. But he started Celebrity Center in 1963, I think. And from very early on, he tried to get celebrities involved because he knew that that was going
So it was
to...
intentional.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And there's a policy about celebrities, and it's rumored that that Elvis had a copy of Dianetics. Well, that's true because Priscilla said that she found his copy of Dianetics, and that's what got her interested in getting involved in the church. But the rumor is there's a policy letter, and I've read this policy letter, and it's concerning celebrities, HCOB policy letter, bulletin, whatever. And in this rumor, Elvis had come into a mission and wanted to get Dianetic auditing because he was having problems with drugs and stuff, and he wanted to go clear. And the registrar, and Elvis wrote a check and told the registrar, this check won't be good until Tuesday, but I'll come back Tuesday whenever, you know, I don't expect to get the auditing now, but as soon as the check clears, you know, we can start. Well, the registrar said no, like, you know, we can only take cash, or, you know, the check has to clear like now because we need the money now. And he said, well, screw you people. And he never went back. but there are very clear, yeah, okay, celebrities are handled completely differently. They are the elite class of Scientologists, and so a lot of them do not see a lot of the abuses and things that go on, or if they do, they are justifying it with the ethics technology that they learn. I was around quite a few celebrities, and I noticed that to be true. My friend, I was very friendly with Rachel Miner and Hallows, and I mean, they're not huge celebrities or anything, but they're a hell of a lot richer than I am, or probably ever will be. And I know that they saw some of the abuses that were occurring, but they justify it through the teachings of L. Ron Hubbard, because they see themselves as superior beings because they have success, because they are, you know, in the media, in the public, and have that influence. See, L. Ron Hubbard talks about artists as, you know, very capable beings, capable of more than the average person or so, you know. He doesn't directly say that, but it's very much insinuated. So, yeah, there's a reason. There's a reason why there's Celebrity Center in Hollywood, and there was a real reason why they wanted to build the Melrose Mission, and it was because a lot of the first generation very successful Scientologists at Celebrity Center were having children, or had children that were friends with some of the celebrities that I was working with, and they wanted a place to have their own space away from Celebrity Center, because Celebrity Center was run by the Sea Org, which is a monastic, very hardcore organization, and they don't tolerate shit from, you know, 18-year-olds that want to party all the time. So it was sort of my job to be a somewhat undercover Scientologist, to go hang out with these people, but at the same time get them to give money to build this mission, this eclectic, like bohemian style mission, where there would be music and art and poetry, and develop this as sort of a miniature Celebrity Center, and bring in B-list celebrities to then move up to Celebrity Center. And part of my experience for that job comes from when I was in Nashville, and there was a time where I was working with celebrities out of Nashville, stage managing with different celebrities, so they knew that I was capable of dealing with celebrities in a mature and effective way. And some of the other people that were at the mission, they just get starstruck every time they see somebody.
Well, I've heard the concept, the term Dianetics for a long time before I realized it was connected with the Scientology, actually.
Right.
Over a period of years.
And that's the idea. I mean, they have over 13 organizations that they don't want you to know are associated with Scientology. One of them is Narconon. We have one in Louisiana, and they currently are being sued. There's a class action lawsuit going on. And it's the same program that I did when I first got in, the detoxification and stuff like that. They have educational programs, they have business investment programs, they have criminal rehabilitation programs, and none of it will say in any point L. Ron Hubbard, you know.
Well, the funny thing, like a Sigmund Freud or one of his proteges could have done pretty much the same thing. Mm-hmm. If they had the mind to, because when you look at, put them side by side, you know, Freud had the id, ego, superego, and
sure, reactive mind, analytical mind, Thetan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like a graphic novel or something.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an amalgamation of tons of philosophies and
the 19th century and early 20th century psychology and psychoanalysis.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm getting tired of standing up here, so thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate y'all coming out. Thanks a bunch. Especially, man, dude, I haven't seen you in so freaking long.
Proud of you, Marcus.
Thank you.